Alright guys, I decided I'm going to start that land nav series, so got my dry erase board behind me and we're going to get going on that. Bear in mind, we're talking map reading, basic map reading and land navigation skills. It's all going to deal with topographical maps, and you're going to need at least a halfway decent compass in order to navigate on that map. There's a bunch of them out there. One that I'm familiar with, I've used it for years, you've seen it in my kit, is the Kaminga military compass. Hasn't failed me yet. It's good in the woods. Just some others off the top of my head is any of the Brunton compasses are good, you know, other than the button ones, just for general direction. But you're going to need a compass that gives you exact information and has some other tools on it as well. But any of the Brunton ones, the silver compasses are good. The silver Ranger is another good compass. I have some experience with that one as well, and I might even be picking one of them up. So again, dealing with topographical maps, they're usually the MGRS, which is a military grid reference system, and that's what you want for any land navigational purposes. So give me a second and adjust the camera, and we're going to get started. Alright guys, we're back. Again, it's basic map reading and land navigation. Talk about the 5 basic colors. Black usually represents any man-made objects. You know, hash marks in black or dashes usually represent trails and things like that. Any buildings or structures, all that type of stuff is going to be in black. Next is red. That equals any major roads or highways, and sometimes there's other markings on the map that they'll use red for, but mainly it's the major roads. Blue, obviously self-explanatory, that's going to represent any water, whether it be rivers, lakes, ponds, streams, ocean, anything like that. Green is going to be your vegetation, and there's 2 types of green. If you get like the lighter green, that's usually not so dense, and the darker green that it gets, that's usually pretty dense forest and stuff like that. Brown is going to represent your contour lines. Contour lines represent elevation, and once we get on the map, we'll show you that a little bit. Next thing I'm going to talk about is some terrain features that you're going to see on the map. There's 5 major terrain features, and you've probably seen in other videos. If you just look at your hand, you can cover pretty much all of the terrain features. But we'll go over them right here on the board real quick. First one you're going to come across is a ridge, which is just a series of hilltops. It'll look something like this. These are all contour lines, of course. So this is a ridge line right here. Each one of these circles represents a hilltop. So a series of hilltops, that represents a ridge line. And again, all these lines right here are contour lines. The next one obviously is the hilltop, which is these circles here. So you got 3 hilltops, a ridge line. Next one we're going to talk about is a saddle, and that comes in between 2 hilltops. So right here in this area is a saddle. Next one is going to be a valley. These contour lines, obviously if you're on the hilltop, these contour lines are going to be going down in elevation. So if you had another hilltop over here, or ridge line, with contour lines as well, and again this would be going down from each of these hilltops in elevation. In between these 2 ridge lines, right in this area, is a valley. Alright, so we got a ridge line, a hilltop, a saddle, and a valley. Is 4. Next thing I want to talk about is a depression. Let me get that out of your way. So a depression is going to look pretty much the same as a hilltop, except it's going to have tick marks on the inside, something like that, and that just means it's sunk in, that's a depression. So looking at it on your hand, get up so you can see it, each one of my knuckles represents a hilltop, and when they're in a series like that, that represents your ridge line. In between each hilltop, just like I showed on the board, the indent is a saddle. If you take both of your hands and put them together, you have two ridge lines on the top, one on each side, both coming downhill. In the middle there, that represents your valley. Alright? I like to just make a fist, and on the inside of that, it's the circle with all the little tick marks from the bends in your finger. That represents a depression. So now we'll get into some of the minor terrain features, which are a spur, a draw, and then there's two others. So a spur usually comes off like a ridge line. So you have your ridge line here. At the end of this, where all the contour lines are going down, this part right here represents a spur. And you can find that on your hand as well. So coming down from the hilltop on the knuckle, each one of your fingers would represent a spur because they stick out. In between those, all the indents represent a draw. And what that is, saying in between your two ridge lines, these contour lines, again on both sides, are running down away from the hilltops. Well, hopefully you guys can see that. But it's usually, in a draw is where you're going to find water. So usually there'll be some runoff, it'll be erosion taking place from where the water's running off, you know, a hilltop, a mountain, etc. Stuff like that. Two more terrain features, and they're both man-made, is either a cut or a fill. So you can have a hilltop, and they may have built a store or whatever on the side of that hilltop and actually cut away from it to put the building in. So what you would see there is something like this. And the tick marks, again, just like a depression, would be facing in, which means they cut away from that hilltop to make that area. Opposite side of that, usually you'll see this a lot with bridges. Just say you have a set of railroad tracks coming through, and they needed to build up that area. So a symbol, I'll just give you a bonus here, throw you a bone, for a bridge on a map is this. Well, if they need to fill that area in to get that set of train tracks in there, you'd see the opposite. The tick marks on this side, meaning they filled in the area in between that, and that's a fill. So those are the basic terrain features on a map. We'll start getting into a little bit more detail as we get along here. But start out with the basics. So we started out with 5 basic colors, which is black, red, green, brown, and red. I'm sorry, black, brown, green, red, and blue. And then you've got the 5 major terrain features, which were ridge, hill, saddle, valley, and depression. And then I showed you the 4 minor ones, which were spur, draw, a cut, and a fill. So that's going to stop at our first video here, and we'll get further in depth again as we go along. So we'll see you on the next one.